We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Friday, November 28th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Grace.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And also Moonju's with us.
Great to be here.
Good to have you. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we finally reached the final stretch of the week, and we wanted to wrap up with something everyone can relate to: communication. So how we talk to one another, how we stay connected, and even how we prefer to communicate have all been changing incredibly fast. One thing that's especially interesting is how different generations approach communication. So some people still swear by face-to-face conversations, saying it's the most sincere and effective way to build trust. Others feel much more comfortable with non-face-to-face communication. So today, I'm going to start out with asking you, Grace, what do you prefer? Do you prefer non-face-to-face or face-to-face communication?
Honestly, I prefer non-face-to-face communication just because, like you mentioned, I feel more comfortable being in my own space, having the freedom to carry on a conversation without having to worry really about my reactions or other nonverbal communication cues. Of course, I do think that face-to-face communication is necessary in more serious or high-level circumstances to decipher context and details, and of course for nurturing relationships. But in most situations, I think that digital communication is more efficient, time-saving, and it cuts unnecessary small talk.
So does your preference for digital communication, does it apply to just a workplace or just across the board?
For me, I think it's just my personality across the board.
I see.
I'd rather text my friends rather than meet them up and or phone them. Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's just my personality.
Okay, I see. So what about you, Moonju? Where do you stand?
I do prefer in-person communications, but once you have a certain level of relationship have built, digital methods, I think, carry a high risk of misinterpreting my nuances or my intentions, which can lead to unnecessary misunderstandings. While video calls may lessen this kind of misunderstandings, but I think it still opens more room compared to face-to-face interactions. However, when relationship has not been built yet, I think it might be awkward for both sides to meet face-to-face right away. So in that case, I think starting with a digital communication and then setting up a time and place for a in-person meeting could be more efficient. Yeah.
So since you prefer face-to-face, how do you feel about video calls?
I like it. I love it. But still, again, here, when I have a intimate relationship with the guy or the person,
right?
I pretty like video calls because I really like chatting, talking,
really,
some facial expressions. Yeah.
Because I heard these things. It's a very Gen Z thing to do cold calls. So you cold call, you video call someone randomly when you. How do you feel about that? Would that be okay with you too?
Here we go. I'm not Gen Z, I think. I don't make any cold calls. I'm very uncomfortable with cold calls, but still I like making video calls or phone calling with my very intimate friends.
People that you actually feel comfortable with. So there are different views on this. So we're going to dive deeper into this phenomenon. But first, let's take a look at the screen. Communication is essential, not just for getting work done, but for building relationships and staying connected. But how we communicate can look very different depending on the generation. Some still prefer face-to-face conversations, while others are far more comfortable communicating online. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how communication preferences differ across generations, what sparked the rise of non-face-to-face communication among millennials and Gen Z, and how we can bridge these widening communication gaps. So as we just saw in the video, each generation brings its own style and comfort level to communication. And these differences aren't just about personal preferences. They reflect broader social, cultural, and technological shifts that shape the way we connect with one another. So Grace, which communication method does each generation tend to prefer?
Well, a recent survey in Korea asked respondents from each generation which communication method that they prefer: face-to-face meetings, via messenger platforms, direct messages on social media, phone calls, and video calls. And the survey found that each generation has different communication preferences. In particular, preferences for in-person communication was lowest among Gen Z at 27%, but then it tends to increase with age. 36% of millennials, 43% of Gen X, and 46% of baby boomers prefer in-person communication. And in terms of communication methods, messaging platforms was the most preferred among millennials at 42% and Gen Z at 52%.
I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's kind of expected, but there's an actual survey that shows that younger generations, especially Gen Zs, are much more comfortable with online communication than older generations. So it's not surprising that for them, obviously, messaging and DMs feels just as natural as talking in person. But on the flip side, the older generations seem to view non-face-to-face communications more negatively. So why do you think this is, Minju?
Yeah, I think the reasons might vary, but one special one or the one most popular one could be efficiency, I think. You know, some people believe like texting takes more time and effort because you have to go back and forth with the others. And also, if something isn't really clear, you have to write a long message, which kind of takes time and effort. This being said, you know, younger generations tend to prefer non-face-to-face communication, whereas older generations often perceive it unfavorably. If you take a look at our screen here, 35% of baby boomers and 20% of Gen X reported viewing non-face-to-face communication negatively. In contrast, only 14% of millennials and 8% of Gen Z kind of expressed the same view. At the same time, you know, Gen Z displayed the highest confidence in their communication skills, with 57% rating themselves superior, which was very interesting.
So that definitely shows like a generational divide. So as a Gen Z, do you just rate your communication skills as superior?
Okay, first of all, I don't think I'm a Gen Z. I don't make any cold calls, and I don't rate myself as superior communication skill. So I don't think I'm a Gen Z. I should come up with a new generation called Gen Moonju or something, right?
No, I think it's quite surprising how there's a lot of people that are so confident in their communication skills. So it's clear that Gen Zs are not only comfortable, but confident in their communication skills. So thinking about confidence levels, it seems that Gen Zs feel not just capable, even excellent, or superior at digital communication. So Grace, can you talk or can you explain what factors led to this rise in non-face-to-face communication among this younger generation?
Sure. Being familiar with social media culture and having built much of their social networks online since adolescence, millennials and Gen Z perceive physical contact as unnecessary for building intimacy and interpersonal relationships. And this explains why they've adapted much better than older generations to the nearly 3 years of forced non-face-to-face interactions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, with social distancing measures in place during this time, digital infrastructure like online conferencing platforms and delivery apps made an array of remote communication possible. For instance, telemedicine, online tutoring, and of course, working and schooling from home became way more convenient and efficient for most young people.
I remember like doing meetings with, online meetings was so rare before, but now it's become so common. Like, so I went to grad school during the COVID era, so all my classes were online, and it was kind of uncommon then. So what was your experience like because you worked at a company?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that everyone needed to adapt to because we weren't used to working from home. And even now, like once the COVID pandemic ended, we went straight back into the office, unlike other companies.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, for me, it was nice because like I mentioned, I don't really like face-to-face communication.
Digital.
So yeah, we would take turns doing work from home days. And I really just liked, just being at the comfort of my own home, being able to just message my superiors rather than talking to them face to face.
I think especially with work, I agree that. And it is a lot easier sometimes. And it really highlights also how young people grew up immersed in online communities and social media culture. So for a lot of young people, forming close relationships doesn't require physical presence, which explains why they adapted so well to this pandemic shift to non-face-to-face communication. And interestingly, this shift hasn't just been about necessity. So Moonju, could you explain more about why young people prefer non-face-to-face communication over this traditional face-to-face interactions?
Yeah, sure. There's a growing perception that non-face-to-face communication requires less emotional energy. I think it is kind of true. In-person interaction, demands attention to facial expressions, tone, and even atmosphere, which can feel emotionally costly. By contrast, non-face-to-face methods like messaging apps, DMs, or even emails are often asynchronous, which means that there's less pressure to respond immediately and fewer emotional cues to manage. Like people also appreciate the autonomy it provides. You can decide when to reply, you can even decide to leave it unread, and control the timing entirely on your pace. So on top of that, non-face-to-face communication is seen as more efficient because there's no need for preparation, no need for traveling or small talk that might even take a longer time to meet with a person.
So what you said really shows how much emotional energy face-to-face conversations can require. For a lot of people, being able to control the timing of their responses makes communication feel a lot more manageable, especially at work. So we also want to know what you think too. So we asked on the Arirang News YouTube channel, why do people prefer non-face-to-face communication? And here's what the results showed. So when asked why they prefer non-face-to-face communication, 58% said it creates a less psychological pressure. Another 20% point to lack of time and location constraints, while 18% appreciated being able to multitask during conversations. The remaining 4% cited other reasons. So just looking at the results, it's interesting that psychological pressure outweighs all other factors by such a large margin, and time savings and multitasking matter, but feeling less tense, I guess, seems to be the biggest driver. So for more, we're going to speak with someone in his 40s here in Korea who often interacts with people in the younger generation. So that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
So joining us today is Brian, who runs private learning institutions here in Korea. So hi, Brian. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled.
We're thrilled to have you as well. So why do you prefer face-to-face communication?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I like communication. I believe any types of communication is better than none of the communication, because communication matters. And as you mentioned, I'm running these two schools. As a result, I always contact and get to converse with people. And definitely, if I communicate with people face to face, I can read their faces and body languages. And well, I believe nonverbal way of communicating is better than just communicating with someone online like this. It would have been better if I had been invited to have a communication with you face to face. So, well, in order to get the message across to the other person, face-to-face communication is more effective and efficient. Although it's time-consuming, you have to get ready to go out. You have to make sure that you set up an appointment. So it obviously has disadvantages, but I strongly believe that there are more advantages than disadvantages when it comes to communication. Here's the thing. I love face-to-face communication. It's because I can really get the message across to the other person more effectively, like I said, and I can have a heart-to-heart talk without being distracted. When I meet someone in person, I can get things done. That's why I can see the quick reaction from the other person. I can move things along more quickly and more, I would say, productively in many cases. So in many aspects, believe me, I prefer face-to-face communication.
Then, Brian, what difficulties have you faced due to different communication styles across generations?
That's a great question. How much time do I have? I have many difficulties, believe it or not. That doesn't mean that I'm a good communicator. I'm still evolving, and I have a long way to go. But when it comes to communicating with younger generations, sometimes I feel like they prefer, as your survey shows, non-face-to-face communication. But I feel like I need to sit down and talk with this person to get things done. or to maybe help them kind of resolve issues at hand. They have issues and concerns. That's why they approach me in the first place. And I want to offer my help to them in person. I believe like when I offer them maybe suggestions, solutions in person, I can be a better counselor. But kind of obviously, talking to someone just online or maybe exchanging text has limit. So here's what happened a few months back. I kind of met this person online. I never met this person offline, but I asked her to have a conversation with me on the phone. I didn't want to cause any misunderstanding. That's why I just wanted to even speak with her, but she turned down, saying she felt uncomfortable talking with me even by phone. So this explains how reluctant some people are to have face-to-face communication, as I would say.
Yeah, I see. As you also experience here, there is a communication gap between generations, and what do you think is one way to like kind of bridge those gaps?
That's the million-dollar question. I like to bridge the gap all the time. Here's the deal. There is a gap. We have to accept the fact that there will be a gap. There should be a gap because each generation has its own characteristics and strength and weakness. So there is a gap. But the thing is, you might want to make efforts to bridge the gap, as you mentioned. So I have to say that you have to meet. I mean, in order to bridge the gap, you have to meet. I mean, we're talking about face-to-face communication. Sometimes people are, not willing to go out of their way to meet someone to talk things out. But if you try to meet people, and believe me, like, believe it or not, you can get, whatever you want to do done, maybe in a faster way and in a more productive way, so that you can be happier, you can be satisfied, with the result. So I would say community, you might want to build a community where you have similar interests and taste, so that regardless of age, you can get together and you can hang out even later. And that way, naturally, it can hopefully bridge the gap among generations. So for one example, like, studying English can be a good way to bridge the gap because they have similar interests and their priority is to enhance their English skills.
All right, thank you so much for sharing, bringing up some important points, also sharing your anecdote earlier as well.
Thank you so much for having me once again.
So we just heard from someone in the older generation about the differences in communication styles and how those can sometimes create challenges with younger people. So shifting the conversation back to you, Grace, have you ever experienced any awkward, difficult situations when it comes to communication?
I've definitely seen how generational communication differences have led to awkward moments in day-to-day situations. For example, as we're seeing many fast food chains and even sit-in restaurants use more kiosks or QR code menus, it's making ordering a daunting task for some in the older generations, like my parents. I've noticed that now they give up ordering altogether and just leave it up to us to order when it's through digital methods. And I also sometimes use a popular messaging app in Korea to chat with my grandma, but I've definitely seen her struggle typing sentences out that she would just normally be able to easily communicate with me. And it does take her a much longer time to say what she wants, but it's also been really cool to see how she has adapted, and now she can even send me photos and emojis.
That's so cute. Yeah. But I think that's why, making sure everyone has digital literacy is so important. Because my grandma also has gotten quite good at using that messenger app. So we also send each other gifts. So she does that too. So it's been really nice as well. So what about you, Moonju?
Yeah, I didn't really feel awkward of this differences, excuse me, because I don't really strongly prefer one over the other. But I still noticed the contrast here, while offering a job position for me. Those relatively in older generations kind of wanted to meet face to face and talk the details about it, while those relatively young kind of handled it through all via messages and DMs and emails and stuff. So I think here there's a really clear contrast of how they are handling those kind of important issues regarding them. Yeah.
I agree. So, Grace, what do you think is the best way to approach communication differences between generations?
Well, I think generational differences are in fact only natural, and I think the best way to handle this is to first acknowledge our differences, and accepting that reality will give us the freedom to be more open and understanding to other ways of life and how it's been done by older generations in the past. And it's especially important to have this sort of attitude instead of insisting on our own ways of communicating in this digital era. And we also have to respect former ways of communication like in-person dialogue, writing letters, and talking over the phone, since those methods were probably the most up-to-date and convenient at that time and place. And so, we're gonna eventually get old one day, and our, DMs and messaging apps will probably be outdated in the future as well.
It's kind of a very scary and also very humbling thought.
Yes.
I think it's good to remember. Do you have anything to add, Manju?
Yeah, whether face-to-face or digital, I think here we have to remember the essence is communication. They both have ups and downs of each method here. So rather than, just sticking to one method, we should choose whichever works best in the given situation, I think. For example, a quick report might be handled through a text message, so you could just go back and forth and just confirm it. But when you're deciding any important decisions or making important decisions, I think it is better to do it in face-to-face meetings, but because you can give immediate feedback and you can kind of see each other's facial expressions to think about how they feel about it, right? So I think there are some both ups and downs of it. So in other words, I think finding the right balance is key here as every other things here.
I think you're right. Definitely, I like what you said about how there are definitely pros and cons to each way of methods. It's good to appreciate all different sides. So in the end, there's no single right way to communicate. Each generation brings its own habits, strengths, and comfort zones, and understanding those differences is the first step toward bridging the gap. And one way to do that is to remember that at the end of the day, every generation wants the same thing, to feel heard and understood, and recognizing our differences can actually help us connect better, not divide us. So whether we communicate face-to-face or through a screen, what's important is making the effort to truly understand one another. So that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. And News Gen will be back on Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Grace.
Thank you for having me.
Coming in, also Moonju.
My pleasure.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have the best day. We are News Generation.